A financial exchange is an operationally intensive business. You have customers making a high volume of transactions, your service has to be low latency and highly available, and you're dealing with a lot of money. A cryptocurrency exchange has all of the complexity of a typical financial exchange and then some additional complexity. Shapeshift is a cryptocurrency exchange that allows users to buy and sell digital assets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and lots of other currencies. Shapeshift also has a set of tools and APIs that allow developers to build higher-level applications that transact in cryptocurrencies. Shapeshift's CEO is an early cryptocurrency entrepreneur named Erik Voorhees, who will appear on the show in a near future episode. Today's guest is Jon, the COO of Shapeshift. He handles the operations of the company. He prefers not to use his last name because Shapeshift is particularly sensitive to social engineering attacks. We will get into why that is in this episode. We'll explore lots of other topics too. How to scale a cryptocurrency exchange, the products that Shapeshift offers, and some of the near-death experiences that Shapeshift has had. After all, it is a startup, and every startup has moments where it seems like the company will die. Meetups for Software Engineering Daily are being planned. If you want to attend one, you can go to softwareengineeringdaily.com/meetup and sign up for notifications. We've got one coming up at Datadog in New York in March, as well as HubSpot in Boston. And then in April, I will be at Telesign in LA. And if you're looking for all 700 plus episodes of Software Engineering Daily, you can check out our apps on the iOS and Android App Store. We've got tons of episodes on blockchains, business, distributed systems, lots of other topics. And if you want to become a paid subscriber to Software Engineering Daily, you can hear all of our episodes without advertisements. You can subscribe at softwaredaily.com. And all of the code for our apps is open source. If you're looking for an open source community to be a part of, come check it out at github.com/softwareengineeringdaily. Users have come to expect real time. They crave alerts that their payment is received. They crave little cars zooming around on the map. They crave locking their doors at home when they're not at home. There's no need to reinvent the wheel when it comes to making your app real time. PubNub makes it simple, enabling you to build immersive and interactive experiences on the web, on mobile phones, embedded into hardware, and any other device connected to the internet. With powerful APIs and a robust global infrastructure, you can stream geolocation data, you can send chat messages, you can turn on sprinklers, or you can rock your baby's crib when they start crying. PubNub literally powers IoT cribs. 70 SDKs for web, mobile, IoT, and more means that you can start streaming data in real time without a ton of compatibility headaches. And no need to build your own SDKs from scratch. And lastly, PubNub includes a ton of other real-time features beyond real-time messaging, like presence for online or offline detection, and access manager to thwart trolls and hackers. Go to pubnub.com/sedaily to get started. They offer a generous sandbox tier that's free forever until your app takes off, that is. pubnub.com/sedaily. That's pubnub.com/sedaily. Thank you, PubNub, for being a sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. Jon is the COO of Shapeshift, and he's joining us to discuss cryptocurrencies and running a cryptocurrency exchange. We've just led off the conversation with one of the peculiarities of being part of a cryptocurrency exchange, which is that security policy around trying to, I guess, be cagey with identities. And that's to avoid... What's the purpose of that? Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, first, Jeff, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it and chance to talk to you a bit. Yeah, so starting with that, Shapeshift has a policy regarding the security of our employees where we try not, the general policy, there's more specifics to it that I can't go into, but the general policy is not to give out more information than necessary. And a lot of times that includes whether or not our employees post themselves on LinkedIn, whether or not we give out last names, things like that. It's just trying to control the flow of information so that some of the more nefarious hackers and such in the industry who might want to do us harm or try to steal some of the funds that we have or things like that don't have easy social engineering points that they can just grasp onto and then, try to use that information to get to another piece of information, et cetera, because that's usually how it works. They get one thing and then they use that to get something else, until they've found someone vulnerable or someone they think they can exploit. So the less of that information we put out there in general, from our security perspective, we think that's better for the whole organization. And I know there's a lot of other exchanges that take kind of similar mindsets.
So I've worked at some places that have some high security protocols, but I've never had to do anything like that. Of course, so like I worked at Amazon and they have all kinds of security protocols, but it's just, again, not anything close to that. Is it the nature of the fact that it is a cryptocurrency exchange and you can operate with that cryptocurrency exchange in an anonymous fashion? There are so many security vulnerabilities inherent in the system that you're running. Is that why you just have to take an extra degree of security?
Yeah, I think that's certainly part of it. A lot of it is just what's inherent to the industry, right? So there's so many things that people who run these exchanges have to deal with, and we're a little unique in that case. A lot of these exchanges are holding large amounts of customer funds, often billions and billions of US dollars worth of these various assets. And that's a big target, right? I mean, where we're dealing with what are essentially irreversible crypto assets that when you send them, there's not an easy way to get them back. So if a hacker or someone who's nefarious either gains access or even more likely just has enough information to do like a spear phishing attack, for example, that can be more than enough for them to make off with, millions of dollars in value that you'll never see again. And so as a result, we have to take this stuff very, very seriously. In Shapeshift's case, we're fortunate in that we do not hold customer funds. And so as a result, we're not sitting on, billions of dollars of customer assets or anything. But we still do have a number of our own assets and a lot of those similar problems.
Explain what Shapeshift does for people who are totally unfamiliar to this.
Yeah, so Shapeshift is kind of a platform that allows both users and machines, people and machines, or both users of our product, to easily and frictionlessly buy and sell various digital assets. And specifically to do that without any use of fiat or traditional currency. It's all done just from one digital asset to another digital asset. So in Shapeshift's case, we're actually, holding an inventory of these various things, very much like a storefront might hold a grocery store might hold an inventory of various items. And we kind of buy and sell those with either, a person or a machine interacting with our API that wants to deal with those.
Now, traditionally, a exchange I'm thinking E-Trade, but E-Trade is not really an exchange. I don't think it's more like kind of an exchange provider. But in these kinds of systems, the traditional systems where people are trading, there are notions of accounts that are managed by companies. And I think Shapeshift is kind of interesting because you don't have a notion of accounts, right? You facilitate transactions between people's wallets that are decentralized abstractions. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. When we first built Shapeshift, the goal was always to try to allow the exchange of these various digital assets, or the buying and selling of them more accurately, to be done very transparently and to be done very frictionlessly. And part of that lack of friction, or even more important, safely, and part of that lack of friction and safety that, in our opinion, for a lot of these transactions, user accounts and that type of information is just kind of unnecessary. It doesn't add anything to it. We end up holding a bunch of data about the user that they may not want. If that data becomes a treasure trove for, again, hackers and bad actors to try to go after. So a lot of it is just concerned with customer safety, and we don't want to have to take information that we think just endangers people or endangers customers. And I think a great example of this, and we've kind of seen this over various headlines of the last number of years since we started Shapeshift, but the one that's still relatively fresh in everyone's mind was the Equifax incident. How much better would it be if Equifax hadn't been holding everybody's data, a lot of times even without their knowledge, and just created this treasure trove of information for someone to go after? When our kind of philosophy is, whenever you have that information, it's only a matter of time until it leaks out or gets attacked somehow. And the biggest tech companies and the governments of the world can't keep this information safe. So we think the best way to keep users safe is to not have that information in the first place if we don't need it.
When someone submits an order to Shapeshift, so for example, let's say I want to convert a Bitcoin into the equivalent number of Litecoin or the equivalent number of Ethereum, what do I need to do in order to initiate that transaction as a user?
Yeah, good question. So it's pretty simple the way we've set it up. Essentially, all you have to do, there's a couple ways you can use the system, but at its most basic level, all you have to do is tell us the two assets that you're looking to convert between. So, you tell us that you have Bitcoin and you want Ethereum, for example, and then we give you a Bitcoin address to send to from your own wallet. And as soon as we detect that you've sent that Bitcoin transaction, we figure out what those current rates are, and we convert it and we send you your Ethereum. As soon as we are sure that you've sent it correctly and it's confirmed on the network, it gets sent out immediately to you so that it's never really in transition for very long.
Mm-hmm. And like any sort of exchange, you have buy orders and sell orders coming in for any particular currency. You have people that are looking to sell their Bitcoin. At the same time, you have other people that are looking to buy Bitcoin or exchange it. And more appropriately, I should say, somebody is willing to exchange Bitcoin for another currency, and another person is willing to exchange a different currency for Bitcoin. And in the best case, you would be able to match those two buy and sell orders. That's, exchanges are often doing this internal matching process, which works out really well because then you just take a fee, and you can take a fee from both sides, and it's a very good business for you. But in the event that you happen to not have people that are matched at the same time, or in the event that you yourself do not have the liquid assets available, in order to service that request, you might have to go out to a different exchange and make a purchase of one of those currencies in order to satisfy the user's request. So in that case, Shapeshift is an abstraction over other exchanges as well as its own internal matching system and liquidity. Is that an accurate representation of what the company does?
Yeah, you're close in some of those aspects. We definitely, in some ways, are that kind of abstraction layer in that we make it much easier than having to go to a traditional, centralized order book exchange to figure out if you can post an order that will match with the seller and things like that. So in Shapeshift's case, we're not really exactly doing that type of matching you described. You don't put up a limit order or say, I want to buy this at this price on Shapeshift. Instead, we're just sourcing those prices from the exchanges all the time. And we say, here's the best price we can find right now. And you decide if you want to take that price or leave it. It's more like doing a market order where you decide you want to do this. And then we have the inventory on hand. So we send your order out right away. And you don't have to think about, is this going to match or do I have to wait a period of time or anything like that? You just have to think, okay, I want this asset and I want that asset. Here's the rate. I'm good with that rate. Great. And then it all gets done. And you're right that at times we have to source from other exchanges to manage our liquidity and inventory. But that's kind of one of the magic aspects of Shapeshift is a lot of the stuff we're doing behind the scenes to make sure that we always have enough liquidity and that we're constantly, moving funds back and forth between our own wallets and exchanges that we use to make sure that with whatever's happening, we have the liquidity to meet the demand.
Mm-hmm. You want to have your own liquidity on hand, but at the same time, you want to quote the prices of other exchanges. So it's not like you are making your own subjective assessment of the quote to offer to the user, although you could do that if maybe you do that sometimes, but generally you are pinging a bunch of different exchanges and you're deriving a quote from the other exchanges.
Correct. We're not doing price discovery on our own. Price discovery is best suited for one of those more traditional limit order exchanges because that's, just like any other market, that's how we find what the current price of something. One person's willing to buy at this price, one person's willing to sell at this price, and when they eventually match, they do that. And there's lots of crypto exchanges out there that do that pretty well. So we're not trying to necessarily be exactly in that sphere. Our service is a bit different. It's more about trying to make this easy, fast, and safe for the users involved. And a lot of those users, their eyes just glaze over when they see something like an order book. They have no idea what they're looking at. It's confusing. We try to make this much simpler and easier. Here's a rate to go from this asset to this asset. You just send it here and you get it there, and you don't have to think about it much more than that.
Fascinating. But internally, do you view it as some system of price discovery? Because internally, you could be looking at all the different exchanges and you could say, well, this one has a higher price and we've got a surplus internally of this kind of currency. Well, or maybe we have a paucity of this kind of currency, so maybe we should just quote a higher price from a different exchange. Or do you always defer to the lowest price that you find among the set of exchanges?
Yeah, good question. We definitely could do those type of things, and we've explored those type of things that you just mentioned. But really, our goal is generally to try to get the consumer the best price we can at any given moment. We feel like it's better to build the business by trying to make the experience the best for our users and our partners, of which a lot of our volume comes from, and show them the best price that we can find at that moment, and not necessarily try to jack it up in any certain way or make it higher for our own benefit. We'd rather just source them what we think is the best price at that time. And I think back to your question regarding price discovery, I think I wouldn't call Shapeshift a mechanism for price discovery, but I think Shapeshift as a whole contributes a lot to the price discovery of the ecosystem just by the fact that our orders do impact the exchanges. And as a result, that's going to adjust the prices as our orders go through them.
If you are on call and you get paged at 2 a.m., are you sure you have all the data you need at your fingertips? Are you worried that you're going to be surprised by things that you missed, errors, or even security vulnerabilities because you don't have the right visibility into your application? You shouldn't be worried. You have worked hard to build an amazing modern application for your customers. You've been worrying over the details and dotting every I and crossing every T. You deserve an analytics tool that was built to those same standards. An analytics tool that will be there for you when you need it the most. Sumo Logic is a cloud-native machine data analytics service that helps you run and secure your modern application. If you are feeling the pain of managing your own log, event, and performance metrics data, check out sumologic.com/sedaily. Even if you have your tools already, it's worth checking out Sumo Logic and seeing if you can leverage your data even more effectively with real-time dashboards and monitoring and improved observability. To improve the uptime of your application and keep your day-to-day runtime more secure, check out sumologic.com/sedaily for a free 30-day trial of Sumo Logic. Find out how Sumo Logic can improve your productivity and your application observability whenever you run your applications. That's sumologic.com/sedaily. Thank you to Sumo Logic for being a sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. Interesting. And if what you're saying is true, then your requests drive down the price. Because if you're typically deferring to the lower priced purchase price of an exchange, then you're probably driving down prices overall.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that means we're driving down price. It depends on the markets. Sometimes the market's just going one way. And we see this all the time, like Ethereum or Bitcoin is just rising like crazy in some types of market scenarios, and everyone wants to buy and they want to speculate as to, maybe which one of these they think is going to be higher a few moments from now and things like that. That drives a lot of that action, sometimes upwards. So I wouldn't say it necessarily moves price down. I would say that Shapeshift in many ways, because we interact with multiple exchanges, kind of forces like a version of arbitrage almost, where it won't necessarily force the price down, but it will eventually force exchange prices together given enough volume.
Right. And my wording there was pretty bad because when I say what's driving the price or something down, these are all like relative quotes, and it doesn't like it driving down one thing just means something else is being driven up. Well, yeah, then that's interesting. So it sounds like basically what Shapeshift serves to do is to thin the margins between thin the arbitrages between different currencies. Yeah. Because if you can sweep the market, if you can sweep all the different exchanges and you can just choose what looks to you to be the most efficient price. That seems to be what the agency of Shapeshift is all about, is let's find more market efficiency. And then also like looking at Shapeshift's products, what you said about kind of trying to drive customer trust and customer value, that kind of resonates because it looks like you're working on a lot of ways that things like e-commerce companies could build in plugins and things like that. Looks like you're working on the upsells, and working on the upsells, I would say, is predicated on having the lower level aspects of your business working really smoothly and getting the customer a great deal of trust and a great deal of value.
Yeah, I mean, I think that puts it well. When Shapeshift started, the goal was always just to make things easier. Make the especially in the early days of crypto, back when we started 4 years ago, and even before that, there was a lot of really terrible user experience in the space. It's still not the best compared to a lot of other industries, and it's gotten better. And I think a lot of that has to do with the roots of all of this really being, a lot of very technical and engineering-minded people don't always make the best for design and user experience level things when something needs to become more mainstream, as crypto's starting to inch closer to. And I think Shapeshift, we really always wanted to focus on that UX and just create tools and various products that make the ecosystem and cryptocurrency easier to use. That's always been our goal.
Can you tell me a little bit about integrating with those other exchanges? Like when you ping an exchange, does it tell you how much liquidity is on that exchange, and like how many exchanges do you have to integrate with, and do you have some measurement of trust of the different exchanges? Because like maybe you ping one and then you put in a market order and it looks like they may have screwed you over or something. When you analyze it in retrospect, like, oh well, they gave us one small lot at that price that they had quoted us, but then they jacked up the price really quickly, and it feels like we're getting cheated here. Just tell me about the interaction between these different exchanges.
Good question. So the various exchanges that we work with, and we're always kind of adjusting this list, it kind of depends like who actually has the volume and what's popular on the market at any given time. So we try to plug into as many of the major exchanges that are doing volume as we can, at least for the asset pairs that we use, and make sure that we're ready to use those at any given time. It's easy to think that, I see a lot of FUD and conspiracies get thrown around online of people thinking exchanges are screwing them or doing nefarious things in various ways. As someone who's, operating a company in this space, I have a lot of sympathy against those type of arguments, because I know that people just tend to jump to whatever they want when they see things like that. And it's usually not the case. So in our case, like when we pull an API from an exchange, and it will differ a little bit from exchange to exchange, we're just pulling like the state of the order book. We're trying to figure out, for this asset, what are the various orders on that book? What kind of price can we derive from those orders? And how long do we think those orders are going to be on that book? And if they've changed since we last looked at it, we need to update it again. I don't feel like we usually feel like we're getting cheated or anything by an exchange, because it's usually the users on the exchange are setting the price, not the exchange itself, right? Because it's people buying and selling that actually forms that market price. Now, there have certainly been times when, maybe some things have happened on various exchanges or bugs have happened. And in those cases, we have to get in contact with the exchange operators and just work things out. But I've never really seen a time where we couldn't just work things out, other than exchanges that have actually collapsed. That's the biggest risk in the whole market. And one of the reasons people like to use something like Shapeshift rather than one of these exchanges is at any given time, if an exchange is holding your keys and they disappear, there's very little you can do. So we really at Shapeshift try to encourage users to hold their own keys, and we don't ever want to hold their keys exactly for that reason. And that's the real risk, more than messing with you on the price or something like that.
Right. Okay. So this is the risk of a exchange also functioning as a bank, which is problematic, because if the exchange blows up for some reason, either it takes too much risk or it has some sort of bug where, it ends up sending out tons and tons of money and is not
or in the crypto space, kind of back to our original point, more than likely the reason most of these exchanges have been knocked over is they got hacked.
Right. Certainly. I mean, yeah, you can just get hacked, or you can have like a Night Capital type of event where maybe you've got some automated system that goes haywire, you ship a bug and it just ends up trading out all the assets, and then it's like, oh, well, we've got all these customer assets that, maybe they were they were margining against those customer assets, and then they end up like claiming the assets or something. I think hacking, but hacking, like you said, is probably the biggest issue.
It at least has been historically.
Historically, yes, historically. So tell me about support, because you've got a system where basically people don't need to have accounts. They just make a transaction. They put in the wallets. I guess they just have to put in their, the wallet that they are sending money from, as well as the wallet that they want money sent to. That's really all they have to input. But if there's some kind of bug that occurs, they need to be able to contact support, and I guess they would need to be able to tell support what happened. And in a typical support system, you can just say, oh yeah, my login is this, my birthday is this. And so how do you handle support tickets?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you would think it would be harder for us in many ways, but Shapeshift has, throughout its history, been known to have one of the better support systems and support teams in the whole industry. And one of the reasons for that is that everything we do is visible and transparent. It's all on chain of some various blockchain. So even if we don't have an account, all we need is for a user to, point us at the transaction on the blockchain, and then we can track down what's going on and figure out, fixing it for them. We have a good support, a growing support team, and particularly at the end of last year when volumes were growing across the industry, pretty much every crypto exchange in the space was dealing with just scaling their support teams. They just couldn't keep up, and we were no different at that time. But at this point, we're very caught up, and it's really never been an issue for us. In fact, it actually makes support easier, because anytime a user contacts us, we just have to figure out what happened on chain, and we can trace it back. And there's nothing, you can't hide anything on a public blockchain. It's all right there, so we can figure it out every single time, pretty much.
That's true. That is actually, you have a super simple API where people are just sending transactions to a wallet that is owned by Shapeshift. And so when they point to a transaction and say, hey, I was trying to send money to Shapeshift, can you inspect that? It's very well defined.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't seem problematic after all. Have there been any vulnerabilities where you could have a support system where if you have a malicious support person, maybe they could conspire with outside actors to scam Shapeshift? Like if you accidentally hired somebody who is just very greedy, and I don't know, have you considered that sort of vulnerability?
Absolutely. We ourselves got hacked a number of years ago. There's actually a story out there you can Google that Erik, our CEO, wrote, called The Looting of the Fox, that kind of explains the whole situation that we dealt with. And it was all because of an internal actor. Internal threats are by far and large probably the biggest threat that any crypto company faces, because they're the ones that you put trust in. They're the ones who gain access to things. A lot of how we design and try to design both our support and operational systems is to try to avoid those type of things. And it's not an easy process. You have to trust people at certain points. You have to try to hire the right people. And then you have to try to design systems that both give them enough access to do their jobs, but also make sure they're being audited and checked, and that if they were to do something wrong, it can be traced back to them. So that is a difficult challenge that I think every crypto company deals with, and we're no different there. But we've definitely developed some of our own processes, and we're constantly evolving that to watch out for that type of internal threat.
Yeah, you've got some truly Byzantine actors in the distributed system there. So these kinds of support vulnerabilities, in order to think through them, do you bring in security experts, or are they just things that you can only learn by getting bruised a number of times? Or does it come down to tooling that you have to build? How do you ensure that you are less vulnerable to inside actors?
All of the above, really. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to any sort of security question, in my opinion. So we look at outside people to try to help us, on various things, get security audits as we need them on various products. We also have a chief information security officer and security team on staff here at Shapeshift. And, that's obviously a big part of their task, is trying to hunt down these various problems and keep ahead of it. And at the same time, we do need to build some of our own tools because our problems are unique. And, going back to what I was saying about that looting of the Fox story that we published after our own incident, we thought that was really important because there isn't a lot of visibility into these things. A lot of companies, even traditional companies, get hacked all the time and you never hear about it because nobody wants to admit that something happened, but it's really hard to learn if nobody shares that information. So in our case, it was really important that we shared that information because we wanted to promote better practices and security around the whole space. And we wanted to show people like, here's things we did where we know we messed up and that other people can learn from so that hopefully they don't have to learn it firsthand. So we look at that information, we talk to other exchanges, and we try to really share information collaboratively in the community so that we can combat these things. But there's definitely no panacea, type solution that you just do this one thing and everything's great. It's a constant iteration and constantly changing.
In that event where you had an inside actor, was there legal recourse there? Were you able to go to law enforcement and say, hey, we got hacked by an inside actor? Or does law enforcement just say, it's a cryptocurrency company, we can't help you?
Yeah. So in our case, we definitely did go to law enforcement, and we ended up getting a civil judgment against the actor, the former employee. Unfortunately, that employee basically fled and disappeared. So getting a judgment against them is not that helpful if you can't enforce it and find them and find something to actually take back. But the law enforcement did talk to us at various points. At various points, they showed interest in going after this person, but we've never seen the actual fruits of that labor. I mean, for all I know, there could still be some sort of investigation or case going on there, but we haven't heard any updates on it in a while. And law enforcement is not usually going to share that information with you.
Have there been any moments, maybe that was one of the moments, but I mean, every startup has its moments where they're just like, oh, we're going to die here. Like, this is going to kill our business. Have you had any hair on fire moments like that where you're just like, okay, we're dead, we lose?
I'm not even sure if I can count the number of moments to the point where like I'm so hardened to them where nowadays when those type of things come up, they don't even faze me, even though our newer members of the staff get very fazed by them. Yeah, that hack was definitely one of the biggest moments. We were, more importantly than losing the money we did, which comparatively to some other crypto exchange hacks was not even that much. But even though it was significant for us at that stage, it was the fact that it brought our site, we had to rebuild our infrastructure. It brought our product down for like over 2 weeks. You never know when you bring your up an operating product like that and it goes down for that period of time. Are you going to be able to regain people's trust? Or are they still going to want to use it? Fortunately, I think, because of our model, the fact that we didn't hold customer funds and the fact that no customers lost anything in our incident, that really gave us some credibility. We were one of the few companies that was able to turn an incident like that into actually, a positive PR event because it kind of proved out our model. There was no data for that hacker to steal from customers, and there was no funds for that hacker to steal from customers.
Wow.
So while we were exposed to some risk, nobody else was. And so when we turned back online, we were very fortunate that our customers really still wanted to use us and still trusted us because we had just basically demonstrated our model to them, even though that wasn't the way we necessarily wanted to do it.
Okay, that's really interesting. Got a collection of random questions I wanted to ask you. How do trading bots affect your business? Yeah,
trading bots, like kind of as I mentioned in the beginning, there's two really main use cases for Shapeshift. It's either people themselves using it or various machines. And the trading bots would fall into that machine category. And we're totally fine with that. It doesn't necessarily affect our business. It's just yet another machine that might add volume to our exchange.
Mm-hmm. How does regulation affect Shapeshift today?
Well, that's another constantly evolving question, of course, and it honestly depends too on which jurisdiction you're talking about, because Shapeshift is a very global business. We get volume and business from all over the world, and there's various jurisdictions, and those jurisdictions have a lot of different opinions, often at odds with each other about how they want to view this stuff, and it's not very clear yet. So it's something where we have a legal department. We spend a lot on legal bills trying to figure all this stuff out, figure out how do we operate our business in certain areas, and figuring out all these questions is a constant process. It's hard to say exactly how it affects us on any given day because it feels like it changes every week almost, especially lately.
Do you have to register yourself as an exchange?
Again, it depends on the jurisdiction and who you ask and who you're getting legal advice from. I can't necessarily comment exactly on that, on what is exactly required and what is defined as an exchange and all these things. It's a constantly evolving process.
And is it evolving to the point where like there are places where it's just not defined at all and you're operating in some sort of gray area?
Yeah, well, I think crypto as a whole has existed in, a kind of uncertain area for a number of years.
Yeah.
Regulators people are paying more attention And regulators are starting to look at it, sometimes to the detriment of the industry, obviously. One of the big achievements of the internet was that it was able to go so long without significant regulation. It really allowed a lot to develop. And we really like to see that happen in the crypto world, but we know that regulators are going to have their opinions on things and they're going to try to regulate certain things. And we have to pay attention to that and try to comply with all local laws of any jurisdiction we serve. So it's just something we're constantly having to reevaluate. In the very early days, a number of years ago, one of the first kind of states, in the US, for example, to do anything significant was New York, when they passed what's called the BIT license from the New York Financial Services Department. And that was one of the clear, pieces of legislation actually on the books that made it clear that what we were doing needed a license, and we would have to go through this whole process. And ourselves and a number of other crypto companies that saw it as way too onerous and hurting innovation decided to leave and no longer service New York. And to this day, we don't service New York as a result of that.
Software Engineering Daily is brought to you by ConsenSys. Do you think blockchain technology is only used for cryptocurrency? Think again. ConsenSys develops tools and infrastructure to enable a decentralized future built on Ethereum, the most advanced blockchain development platform. ConsenSys has hundreds of Web3 developers that are building decentralized applications, focusing on world-changing ideas like creating a system for self-sovereign identity, managing supply chains, developing a more efficient electricity provider, and much more. So, listeners, why continue to build the internet of today when you can build the internet of the future on the blockchain? ConsenSys is actively hiring talented software developers to help build the decentralized web. Learn more about ConsenSys projects and open source jobs at consensys.net/sedaily. That's CONSENSYS.net/sedaily. Consensys.net/sedaily. Thanks again, ConsenSys. The BIT license that was promoted by somebody in government who shortly thereafter left government to start a consultancy that helped people become compliant with that policy that he had helped push into action. It was like the prime example of regulators just playing both sides of the table. And I think, for a lot of people in cryptocurrency, that probably just made them all the more obsessed with kind of the maybe the Erik Voorhees flavor of let's be less regulated, let's have more liberation and experimentation.
Yeah, I think that was an important lesson to a lot of people in the crypto industry, because I think you just described very well what happened. And a lot of people, a lot of big, thought leaders tried to engage with the creators of the BIT license during all the discussions, and to really try to help them guide what they were doing and show them the issues they were going to cause if they didn't change the way they were doing it. And they were just kind of, they were kind of passively listened to and then ignored. And then New York ended up passing this terrible license. And even to this day, it seems like it's not something any of them want. And then the guy who had really spearheaded it just left, and the financial services department was left dealing with this thing that none of them really wanted to deal with. And it's just a perfect example of, bad regulation that was clearly passed that benefited almost nobody, except for maybe large incumbents that wanted to stifle innovation. And that's really not good for consumers. That never leads to benefits to consumers. And to the degree that regulators want to say that they're trying to help and protect consumers, that type of thing is really not what's going to help.
Although the efforts of the SEC, at least to cast some aspersions on ICOs and perhaps some ominous warnings that are being issued to ICOs, perhaps past and future, and shortly impending ICO participants, that stuff may be positive. Because some of these ICOs are just terrible, just completely fraudulent, just completely worthless tokens that are being offered to people. Although, maybe if you're somebody like Erik Voorhees, maybe you would say, well, maybe this is the, this should be allowed because if people can't figure out for themselves what to invest in, then they shouldn't be investing. And I have no idea if Erik Voorhees ever said something like that, but I could imagine him saying something like that. Are there tokens that you do not issue or that you do not trade in? Like, well, I don't want to mention any ones, but are there ones that you just do not allow people to trade in, or do you let people trade in whatever they want to?
Well, we're very, this is, again, a large part of what our legal department does is trying to figure out which of these assets, are some sort of high risk of being considered securities and which aren't. We're trying very hard to not list anything that we think may be too close to that line of being potentially considered a security. So that is something we're very cognizant of. And anything listed on Shapeshift is something that we're trying very much, based on our legal advice, to put up there and be kosher with that stuff.
Sorry, you cannot list securities, or you want to list?
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay.
We have not and will never list something that explicitly is recognized to be a security. The things that we're trying to trade and we think are very important is that there's lots of type of digital assets in this space. And a lot of them really don't fit that traditional definition. And I think it's very close to how, like the traditional, when Bitcoin first came onto the scene, everyone wanted to call it just a currency. And that really kind of poisoned the well a little bit because it shaped people's perspectives in a way that they didn't fully understand the technology and what was going on. And Bitcoin is far more than just a currency. It's a currency, it's a protocol, it's a piece of software. It's in many ways its own economic system. It's this thing that just really it defies the categories that had existed beforehand. In many ways, the same way that the internet defied many categories of media before it had existed. So when you have something very new like this, it's very common for everyone to try to couch it in the old terms that they understand because that's the language they have to use with. But in reality, it's something new and category breaking that any language you try to apply to it is really just kind of limiting it and not appreciating it for this new thing that's really been created. And I think this applies to a lot of various types of tokens and assets in the space is that a lot of these just do not fit in this category of being a security. They're something totally different. And obviously, the SEC is going to have their opinion on that, but we have to pay very close attention to that. And other regulators, other jurisdictions will have their opinions, and they're not always in line with what the SEC or others think. And it's kind of nobody really knows the answer to this question because they're all trying to apply old terminology to a very new thing that just breaks all these categories.
I completely agree with what you said. Although you've got currencies like Tron, which the white paper of Tron was copied from the IPFS white paper. You read it and it just smells like a scam. You investigate who is involved in Tron and it looks like a scam. You have things like Tether where you've got this company that is claiming to have $1 in reserve currency for every one Tether in existence, and yet they refuse to let auditors prove it. And you could make arguments that these things should not be traded because they are, at a fundamental level, fraudulent. On the other hand, you could say people want to buy these just because other people believe in them. And that's actually kind of a valid perspective. Like maybe you should let people buy this stuff regardless of the fundamental underpinnings. Maybe you should let people buy Dogecoin, even though there's not much development going on, just because they think other people believe in it. Like that should be fine. I mean, I could see arguments for either side. Do you fall convincingly on either of those sides? Like what are the coins that should be kosher to be traded on something like Shapeshift?
Yeah, I mean, again, Shapeshift is we do not intend to be, something like a securities exchange. We're trying to trade these kind of new ideas and these new type of assets. And again, you're getting into a discussion where we're really trying to classify exactly what these things are. And our opinion is it really is on a case-by-case basis. There are assets that are closer to that security line and should be considered securities. And there are ones that we really think should not, that there's something totally different. And it's hard, other than on a case-by-case basis, to figure those things out. I mean, you even talk about something like, Tether and the issues that I know Bitfinex and the people that own that have had in terms of getting an auditor to bless it and show these things. And we know from our own experience that, and and again, this is always seen differently from the outside, but as a crypto company that has experience in this area, it's really hard to get an auditor to audit anything in the crypto space. It may not be, I'm not saying I know anything about that particular situation because I don't, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if, based on my experience, it has nothing to do with them not wanting to get the audit as much with the auditor basically wanting a bunch of things that are impossible for a crypto exchange to show because they don't really understand what they're auditing yet. It's not like auditors have tons of experience auditing crypto companies. There's a lot of nuances that they just don't understand. And we've seen that even in our own experience trying to get ourselves audited for our investors and various financial purposes. And it's a long and arduous process, and it's not easy. A lot of that issue might just be that people don't understand these things. And I see that all the time. So when it comes to things that are clearly scams and fraudulent, obviously we're against that. We don't want to list things that are clearly scams or fraudulent. We don't want to promote those type of things. They're absolutely going to exist in any sort of free market economy, but we don't think that's the majority of the use cases, and we don't think that that's in and of itself. It shouldn't mean that the whole industry is negative because of that or something like that. It just means that there are some bad actors in the space, and we have to make sure to talk about that and not support those type of bad actors. And hopefully, agencies like the SEC will really focus on those who are doing things that are, purely fraudulent and things like that. That's the type of thing they should be doing.
Fascinating. So how do you assemble a team that can make these kinds of assessments? Do you just bring together the best lawyers and accountants and securities professionals? How are you auditing these things?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I mean, how do you hire people with experience in a space when the space is so new and on the frontier? And, you try to find things that are analogous. You try to find people who have really highly respected and very, smart and powerful individuals who can come and help you. And that's really what we're looking for when we build the space. And in our case, as a crypto company, a lot of what we're building is just, on the engineering side. So we're trying to find, the best and brightest engineers to help us build the future, more or less, because so much of what we're building is just stuff that has never existed before, category breaking, like we've been talking about. It's not something where you have an easy roadmap of you can easily get your business from A to B in this way. It's something totally new and different.
Is there any interesting compensation strategies you use to get good engineers? Because it seems like the war for talent in cryptocurrency is like the war for talent in normal tech, but taken to a higher degree because it's super specialized, and a lot of the people that do have the skills are already rich.
Yeah, that is actually a very good point. And I've heard from more than one other crypto, CEO or COO that they've had issues with retaining employees because their employees got into Bitcoin really early and just got too rich and they didn't want to work anymore. That is a non-unique problem in the industry that you see pop up sometimes. And it is very, very competitive. There's only so much talent out there, and you have to find ways to either take people who aren't in the space and get them up to speed on the nuances of the space, or find those kind of people that already have the skills you need who are already, up to speed in the space, and they're few and far between. So there's no silver bullet to that problem. We have to try real hard, and we have to train our people and try to find the best that we can and bring them in. I wouldn't say there's any necessarily super unique compensation strategies we're using. We're exploring a lot of things other tech startups would do, like finding ways to do, equity plans and ways to get them interested and things like that. And we've talked about exploring ideas like profit sharing and such, which we haven't gotten to yet, but we would like to do more things like that. So we're certainly always evaluating that, trying to find the best way to motivate them. But a lot of it is just pretty standard. I mean, honestly, the best recruitment for Shapeshift and other crypto companies is just that a lot of the people who join us really want to be in the space. We get a lot of people who actually come to Shapeshift, and one of our kind of cultural things is a lot of people take pay cuts to come work for us because they were working at some other job that they thought, they'd have a lot of skill, but it's some big corporation and they don't feel like they're contributing in the way, and they really want to be actually in the blockchain space in crypto. And Shapeshift's a chance for them to do that, and they get really excited about what we're doing, and they want to come on board.
I think people like that take a pay cut, oftentimes they're doing that because of the charisma of the CEO, which I think in this case, Erik Voorhees is a charismatic guy. I've only watched some YouTube videos of him, heard some podcast interviews, and then I kind of looked into his background a little bit. He's been posting in online forums for 9 or 10 years about this kind of stuff. His vision for an economic system that is, I think, I don't know, some people would describe it as crypto anarchic, but I think that has a pejorative flavor to it that I don't think is aligns well with who he is. I mean, how would you describe him and his political beliefs, and do you align with them?
Yeah, I mean, Erik is great. He has said a lot of things publicly, and a lot of people get impressions of that way. But at his heart, Erik is just a very smart, humble, and visionary person. Like he really does see things and intuits things in the industry that I don't think a lot of other people do. And he's genuinely just like kind and really cares about the people that work with him and the things that he's doing, and is so passionate about it. And I do think that permeates out to, potential interviewees and other people who work in the company, that they really appreciate that about him. And he's one of the few people, and I've met a lot of people in the space where, you see the way they talk in public and then you get them in private and they're almost like a totally different person. The person that Erik puts out publicly is himself. He's really not all that different. He's that thoughtful. He's that kind in person. It's been an absolute pleasure to work with him for the last 4 years. So I don't, at times there are parts of his politics that I very much agree with, and then there's times that I disagree with him. And he's, someone he's not trying to get everyone over to his point of view necessarily. He wants a discussion of ideas and for the best one to win out. And he's totally fine if you disagree with him, if you back up your arguments. So I've always very much appreciated that about him and my relationship with him.
Okay, I know we're short on time here, but I'm so fascinated by this company. Can you tell me a little bit about product development and the roadmap / the goals? What's the big vision of where Shapeshift is going?
Yeah, and that itself seems to change a good bit too. But the big vision is to try to kind of stick to our core philosophies of creating products that are easy to use, that add value to the space, that are trustless as much as possible, that don't require people to give us their private keys or become custodians of, and to really kind of proliferate those type of products in the industry that we think are useful. So the current Shapeshift product has been the main driver of that, but we have a couple other ones out there now. We have a Prism, a product in closed beta called Prism, that is another kind of trustless way to create digital portfolios of digital assets and do that in a way via this Ethereum smart contract that we think is really cool. We have another product just for market data and stuff like that called CoinCap. And we recently, last year, acquired the hardware wallet maker KeepKey. And, so now we're also putting those type of things out. And they all kind of fit this philosophy of not trying to take hold of customer funds, trying to make them easy to use, and allowing them to have some sort of this trustless experience having to do with converting one digital asset into another. We have a number of other products, probably about 3 in the pipeline right now that I cannot speak of, unfortunately, because they're not far enough along. But we hope over the next year to be unveiling a number of those and to kind of just keep innovating. We're not a company that's trying to sit back on what we've built and just iterate on just that. We really want to keep building new products and things that we think people will want.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to stop, and I hope to cover those secretive products at some point in the future.
I'd be happy to come back on when that happens.
Okay, Jon. Well, great talking to you.
Yeah, you too, Jeff. Thank you so much for the time today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
The octopus, a sea creature known for its intelligence and flexibility. Octopus Deploy, a friendly deployment automation tool for deploying applications like .NET apps, Java apps, and more. Ask any developer, and they'll tell you that it's never fun pushing code at 5 p.m. on a Friday and then crossing your fingers, hoping for the best. We've all been there. We've all done that. And that's where Octopus Deploy comes into the picture. Octopus Deploy is a friendly deployment automation tool, taking over where your build or CI server ends. Use Octopus to promote releases on-prem or to the cloud. Octopus integrates with your existing build pipeline, TFS and VSTS, Bamboo, TeamCity, and Jenkins. It integrates with AWS, Azure, and on-prem environments. You can reliably and repeatedly deploy your .NET and Java apps and more. If you can package it, Octopus can deploy it. It's quick and easy to install, and you can just go to octopus.com to trial Octopus free for 45 days. That's octopus.com, octopus.com.
Wow.